Gary Monk, who is actually well known for introducing various types of technologies and, dare I say, Web 2.0 or social media as it used to be known in the early days. And it's still known to the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. And he's got some very interesting things to tell us about.
Okay, thank you very much, Adriana. Good evening, everyone. So, first slide here, it's not meant to be self-promotional in any way, but I'm very happy to connect with any of you here. What I didn't want to do was talk about myself in any way in this presentation, apart from very specific to the experiment. A bit of relevant quick background. So I work in healthcare as a marketeer, involved in technology quite heavily. I'm fascinated by it, by a range of gadgets. Also obsessed with health, maybe to an unhealthy degree. I think my doctor thinks I'm a hypochondriac. When you combine those, that's where my interest in quantified self stems from. I've got a particular interest in using quantified self for relaxation purposes, which I'll outline here. Just a bit of background, this is an important slide. It's sort of quite a difficult one for me actually, because when people meet me, they feel that I'm very confident, which I mostly am, but there's those kind of hidden things which people often don't see that I sometimes have challenges with. So there's some particular kind of aspects of negative thinking. There's the sort of negative thoughts that come up from time to time, maybe not on a lot of occasions, but when I'm particularly stressed, can become quite hard to shift and shake off. So the thoughts themselves might be around frustrations, not very serious, but actually just won't go away. Over to the right-hand side, often, and this is kind of a bit more enduring in my psyche, I find that I'm always racing to do the next thing. So I might be working and don't take enough time off and to enjoy what I'm doing, but it's like, what's the next thing I've got to do? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And this other one down here with all the cogs is often sort of positive thoughts can come in and thinking at maybe inappropriate times. So I can let them in, this problem would be great to solve and start thinking about it. But if it's somewhere like when I'm trying to enjoy myself at the theatre, it's obviously something that's not kind of welcome when these thoughts are coming in. So, and often this kind of thinking can obviously leave me feeling quite depleted or low in terms of energy levels. So my objectives really can probably be collapsed down to the top one, which is just to be more present. So the obvious thing for me to achieve that has been meditation, which to a degree actually works, but the challenge I found was actually having enough time to do this. I don't know if any of you practice meditation, do meditation. A number of you, wow, that's a significant number of you. So how many of you would say you practice it daily? Wow, that's pretty impressive stuff. So so yeah, I've been doing it for a significant amount of time, but certainly not daily, and I found it had benefits. My idea was to try and meditate while at work, so I can actually meditate while I'm doing something. What I used was this thing called Heart Rate Variability, which some of you might be aware of. I've heard it mentioned before at some of these meetup groups. I don't know how many of you are aware of the concept of heart. There's a few hands going up for heart rate variability. To give you as simple as possible, it's the variation between beats of your individual heartbeat. So let's say, for example, your heart's beating 60 times per minute. The interval between those beats is unlikely to be exactly 1 second. It will vary, and it will vary if you're happy and appreciative, it will vary in quite a rhythmic and nice way, this sine curve. If you're feeling frustrated, then it's likely to vary in a kind of very much a jagged way. So my goal was to use heart rate variability to get myself in this kind of zone, sort of the Zen zone. Obviously thinking nice, positive, happy thoughts are great for this. One of the secrets is actually having regular breathing. So that's the central part of my experiment was to be able to breathe in a regular way, and once breathing is regulated, then the heart rate variability actually increases. Also called coherence, so you might hear me calling it HRV, heart rate variability, and coherence. I use this device so it was by a company called HeartMath, and I believe it's called the Inner Balance app, with this nice little earpiece, which I tended to get mocked by people at work when I was walking around with this little earpiece around taking my measurements, and people thought I was very odd. So the key thing for me was actually using that rhythmic breathing and using this biofeedback device during everyday tasks. In the interest of time, I'll focus mainly on work. In terms of how I regulated my breathing, a number of different ways, using a visual technique, using an audio technique, and using a touch technique. The visual one worked particularly well. It was using an app which I just looked at, and it helped me breathe in and out, and I just followed it. So that really increased my heart rate variability via the monitor, but it wasn't very practical when I was working because that's the only thing I could focus on. The audio one actually worked very well. I spent a significant amount of time listening to myself. So I've got no sympathy for any of you if they think, God, this guy is so boring, because you've got 10 minutes of me. I listen to myself, telling myself to breathe in and out for about 5,000 minutes during the 4 months. So it got pretty boring, I can tell you, breathe in, breathe out. But actually, I'll show you the results, but the results worked out particularly well for me. But I got sick of the sound of my own voice, so I thought there has to be something better. So I just wanted something that could just maybe vibrate a little bit and signal when I should breathe. I couldn't find anything out there on the market, anything online. I thought I'd build something, but I found an app on the phone which basically I could get an interval timer which I could get to vibrate once every 4 seconds, which was absolutely perfect. In terms of strapping it to my wrist, in my enthusiasm, I just got an old sock and I wrapped it around my iPhone, so it doesn't look too glamorous, but it seemed to work particularly well. I had to sort of change it after a while. It did get a bit smelly. And I had another idea which was a bit more discreet, which was, instead of having to do this, I just managed to put the phone in my pocket on the vibrate mode. I can see a few of you looking at me thinking I probably enjoyed that a little bit too much. But it actually worked very well in terms of me being able to get that pulse every 4 seconds to be able to control my breathing. So in terms of the method, 7.5 breaths per minute. I was breathing in and out every 4 seconds, which seemed to be about the right time for me. Lots of data points, 328 data points over a period of 4 months, about 170 hours of data through this clip. I want to get through to the data to show you. I think there's only one thing I'd show on this spreadsheet that I've captured as an extra thing to help to understand my levels of relaxation. And that was my relaxation score out of 10. So a very subjective measure, but that and this coherence measurement are the key measurements that I took. So this is probably, for me, there's quite a number of slides here, but this is one I'll spend just a little bit longer on, because it's an example for the rest of them. And so when I was actually this coherence score, I don't know what the units are, but they're all relative, but when I was working, this score was about 1.1. When I was working with this F stands for focus, while using the audio or the vibration technique, I was able to triple that score. I didn't feel any loss of quality in the work I was doing. I didn't get fired or nothing bad happened. I felt I was more focused, but I can't say either way whether it was worse or better, but it felt very much the same. But I felt a lot more relaxed. And in fact, if you look at the relaxation scores that I measured after each of the measurements, so that's the coherence score on the right, and on the left-hand side, it might not look big on the scale, but actually my relaxation score normally at work was 6.5, so I wouldn't say I was particularly stressed, but there was certainly room for improvement. When I had this device on at work, it went up a whole point, which I think was great, because I can do the job, I feel, as well, but I'm actually feeling a lot more, but significantly more relaxed. I won't go through all of these in the interest of time, but they're there, but I'll put them on the final summary slide. So if you think of these as sort of pairs, this is the work environment. I also measured myself relaxing and also meditating. I was able to improve my relaxation scores every time. I use this focused breathing technique and also the coherence scores across each of the different domains. Visual worked the best, but as I said, that was not very practical just to keep staring at my phone all day. All I'd say here is don't worry about all this data, but you can see the bars look pretty similar when we consider work here. What was very important for me, though, was to be able to get rid of these headphones so I didn't have to listen to the sound of my own voice. I could listen to work, listen to the Kings of Leon, and have this phone vibrating in my pocket. And that worked as well in terms of increasing my relaxation levels and coherence levels as having the earphones on. So that was a kind of a nice innovation for me that actually worked. And where I spent the time, I wanted to split it across all the various different things and be scientific, but it ended up, this big green segment here is at work. I found it really valuable having this device telling me when to breathe at work and improving my relaxation levels. So this is the audio one here in green. The orange one is the one where it's actually vibrating in my pocket, so I spent a significant amount of time here. This bit I'll come to, but actually I started spending a lot more time, based on the question I asked you earlier, a lot more time actually meditating without only using the device for measurement, but not actually using the breathing technique. One thing as well I found particularly interesting, this is the coherence scores, obviously higher is better, versus relaxation when I was meditating. And there's a clear correlation between the higher my coherence, the higher my relaxation score. So I was confident when I was improving my coherence, I was going to be improving my relaxation scores. I said no time for meditation. This is my tracking of how often I was meditating over the 17 weeks. So very little at the beginning, and it's actually changed my behaviour, which I think is very powerful for me. And now I'm meditating significantly. So this week 17 was about 1 hour a day. That's 420 minutes a week. Seems to give me more energy as well. This is I track my energy levels per day and meditation, and I felt a lot better. So in terms of how I felt a lot more energetic since I've been meditating and doing this. Challenges, probably save that for the discussion, but the obvious ones, I think, there's a hell of a lot of time spent recording the data, probably about 3 days entering all this data manually. So there's probably a smarter way of doing it, and I got smarter at it, but it was very hard to get it out of the device. It was in numerous places on the device. So key conclusions I won't read out. It's definitely changed my behaviour. I'll be able to feel that I can kind of relax a lot more at will. Yeah, indeed. So hopefully that continues. I really want to keep continuing doing this, obviously tracking my results and seeing where it takes me. I'll probably leave this slide on just some ideas where I may take it for the discussion. But one thing I'm kind of reluctant to do is sort of go back to not feeling relaxed. I don't want to kind of let go of using this technique to actually measure myself when I'm not doing it as a comparison, because it's working so well for me. I just want to kind of keep doing it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. When it comes to future research, there's some people who have done some of this, so make sure you connect and maybe exchange information or maybe raise it now. Thank you. So, questions, yes. Sorry, just a point of order for those who are here first time. The question time is about 10 minutes, however, as long as the questions are interesting and there's a discussion, we continue until I say so. The reason for that is I want everyone to get a question in, and I also would like to see the discussion coming out of this. It's not just firing questions at the speaker, but actually interacting a bit. So don't worry about not getting a question in. We're doing amazing. Okay, off you go.
Sorry, could you just recap? Maybe I missed something. What exactly the relaxation and coherence scores are, and how?
What's that, sorry?
What the relaxation and coherence scores are, and how do you
Yeah.
get to that data exactly?
So there was.
Repeat the question.
Oh yes, I will. Yeah. So as I understood it, what were the relaxation scores, the metrics, and how did I arrive at those scores? As I understand. So what were the coherence scores and the relaxation scores? The coherence score was from the device, so it's quite scientific. It was basically measuring that variability when I showed you that graph and showing how nice my heart rate was varying. And the better that was, the higher the score. So it was just purely a number. I tried to find out the units, but it just seemed to be quite relative, so higher was better. The other one was more subjective, which was my own relaxation score, which I took after every session of using the device. I didn't take it before and after, but I'm hoping that it averaged out. So if I was having a particular bad day at work or a good day, I didn't take the before, I just took the after, how I felt after using the device every time. And that was a subjective score of relaxation out of 10. So I combined both of those scores.
And the coherence scores from the heart math.
Yeah, exactly, it's from the Heart Math app. And
were you able to somehow track the time span that you wanted to measure? And does it allow you some sort of onset time and
yeah.
that you average the coherence score over, or how did you do that?
Yeah, and that did it for me actually, because it gave me the average score. So I should probably have mentioned that's a very good point. That was the average score, because you can actually see a graph and see your coherence score varying. So if my average was 3, you'd see it varying from 4 to 2 all the way throughout the cycle. So I took the average score rather than the range or the peaks and the lows. I just took the average, which was the average over the whole amount of time.
Just a question about coherence. I'm less interested in
measuring that? How it's measuring and just what is it supposed to mean? I understand it's mathematical measuring the smoothness of the curve, so to speak, but
Yeah.
what does that actually, and how well is it known what that actually means?
Yeah, what it's supposed to do is actually, when your heart is beating in that kind of rhythmic manner, it's actually reducing the kind of fight and flight syndrome that we've got and more activating it. So I don't know, it's sympathetic or parasympathetic, but your nervous system, so the more relaxed ones, you actually start to feel more relaxed. There's quite a lot of science, and I've looked into it. I'd like to look into it more. But the main purpose for me was actually, this sounds interesting, it seems to work, kind of does it work for me really, and it seems to work. I'd be interested broader in terms of, you know, the actual health benefits it might have longer term, and I'd be interested in looking at more of the science now.
Yeah, I was just curious to ask about the chart that showed the amount of time you were spending tracking it, I think.
Yeah.
'Cause it felt like there were some very obvious periods of time in that and some pretty obvious shifts.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if there was anything in particular that sort of caused or drove those shifts. So it looked like you spent a bit of time doing it, then dropped off,
Yeah.
but then came back and actually started doing it a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Was there anything around those 3 different periods that you thought was relevant?
Yeah, and it varied. I've not split all the different activities up. I mean, I think the one graph I showed was the meditation piece, which actually I started off quite slow and I was increasing on that. In terms of, it would have been a good graph to show actually, in terms of mapping out the time I spent with the device on over that period of time. I'd imagine that would be fairly consistent because I was using it for most days. So going through the data, sometimes it might have been for 20 minutes, half an hour, sometimes 2 hours. So that varied, but it seems to. I'd imagine you see a sort of fairly up and down line over the period. So overall measurements was fairly constant, but then I found myself gravitating to more things like the meditation, doing it more at work with the headphones.
Yeah. Did you measure or just feel any difference in productivity, especially when you there's a couple of weeks where you stopped doing meditation?
Yeah, and that's interesting because when I'd there was a period when I sort of slowed it down and I flicked through the graph quite quickly. And I felt my energy levels dipped quite low, so I did feel that I was less productive. I imagine that it feels like it is to do with the meditation that's kind of bounced back. So the answer to that is yes. The other bit that I'd like to measure as part of this is whether the top bullet there is whether when I'm actually doing this at work I've got better focus, better concentration. I feel I have, but it'd be nice to actually measure that as well.
What was the app you used that vibrated every 4 seconds?
That was called Seconds. I think it's called, I've got it, I can show you later, but I think it's called Seconds if you Google Seconds interval timer.
Okay.
There was a few interval timers on the market, but they seem to have a restricted number of cycles, so they might last for 6 minutes. But the great thing about that is you could just set it to 1,000 or 2,000 times and just keep it going.
Gary, so you're effectively using the vibrating app as a kind of a metronome?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts on whether there might be some other feedback mechanisms that might be developed or maybe more useful? Because I think out of that, you look at it or you listen to the feedback.
Yeah.
What you want to do is go back to normal everyday activity.
Yeah.
But improve it with you.
Yeah.
What might be done in terms of finding real-time feedback?
Yeah.
On how coherent the breathing was.
Yeah, I know that's quite interesting. I did see a sort of online presentation from the US Quantified Self where I think the guy had a different approach, but it was more a little alarm that went off if I think his breathing went out of sync and his heart rate went out of sync. So I think there's stuff that can be done there. I think for me, I wasn't really, and didn't end up using it as a biofeedback device. It was almost like I tried to avoid looking at it. I plugged it in. I wasn't too worried if I went red or green or. I just put it down, and it was sort of afterwards. It was how well have I regulated my breathing. So there's probably maybe more that I could do in terms of direct feedback. I didn't want to kind of distract myself too much with it as well, but that's a good point. Yeah, but it was good that it worked without me actually visually looking at it. It actually improved just by focusing on the breathing naturally. So.
Just a quick one.
Go ahead. You had a question?
Just a remark to your question. It's not directly related to the feedback device about breathing, but related to meditation. There's an amazing device that unfortunately I can't give you the reference, but I can look it up before. It's an amazing device that gives you feedback on the amount of blood that flows in your forehead,
Yeah.
in your prefrontal cortex, which is basically a biofeedback device to help you focus. So basically it's a meditation device.
Yeah.
I don't know if people heard about that or not, or it's well known in the
Yeah, I'm not actually be interested to see what device it is, and I've heard about similar things. Yeah, okay. So it's quite special. It's not a free app then? Yeah, okay.
So, can you, if I wanted to go look for the science that ties stuff like breathing to heart rate and then to like heart variability and then that to well-being,
Yeah.
where would I go look?
Yeah, well, I looked at, there's quite a few different articles online, and some of them are quite reassuring, sort of clinical, lots of sort of clinical research and study being done on it. But there's quite a bit, some academic work done. I think a good sort of introduction to it, and it doesn't seem too biased, is the company, the app that I use, that HeartMath. The HeartMath site seems quite good. Some of it's sort of very kind of, about relaxation or being thinking positive, which is great, but there's some actually kind of interesting science behind it as well. So that's quite good to look at that. And then just sort of Googling it, and I just found myself trailing through different articles and stuff. So yeah.
And another question, there's probably a lot of potential if we can liberate these things from the specific app
Yeah.
and to make data entry
Yeah.
easier, to do stuff like alarm systems,
Yeah.
continuous feedback.
Yeah.
What's your thought on feedback?
Yeah, I think it makes sense for that perspective, but also to save myself all this hassle of taking it out of the different parts of the app, because the data's recorded in, without going into all the detail, 2 different parts of the app, and I had to go into the individual lines and copy them out into an Excel spreadsheet. I'm sure there might be a smarter way of doing it, but even to get the data out and then start integrating it, if I do the other stuff around the blood pressure and the sleep and those devices, to put them in. So I think there's big potential for making it manageable, and also, potentially then for real-time feedback and what have you.
Yes, speaking of meditation, are you aware of this equanimity app timer, equanimity meditation app, which one of the QS people back in San Francisco, Bay Area, created years ago, and it's about meditating every day. It's called equanimity, and it's actually very, very good. So he's like, how do I motivate myself to do it every day? And that's what he did, that app. Just for those of you who seems to be helping people to meditate, then try to do it daily. So I just thought I'd throw it in.
Thank you.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
more in the
Thank you very much. Thank you.